I have something really interesting to bring up today. I had a bit of a discussion in my Discord over classes in Skyblock, right? Because recently I did post a video, why Berserker is the only true class or something. Something fairly clickbaity, but also pretty accurate, right? Because I basically went into detail as to how dungeons, you have 5 different classes, where all of them get a lot of use, like, across the board. I'm not saying in M7 every single class gets used. I'm not saying in Floor 7 every single class gets used normally. I'm just saying across the board, all 5 classes do get used on every single floor, just depending on what you're doing and how much money you have and stuff, right? Berserker's typically lower dungeon floors, because getting things like a Livid Dagger is not that hard, while Mage thrives in Floor 7, the way that I'm using it right now. Archers are amazingly good for Master Mode, and obviously tanks and stuff, healers are very necessary for that as well. So yeah, made the video on basically, it summarized that to an extent, and then it went into detail as to how Skyblock has also been pushing out Kudra armor sets, the Aurora set, the Crimson set, the Terra set, and then the Fervor set, which also are supposed to be class-based armor sets. The only difference, the Crimson Isle is not dungeons anymore. You don't dungeonize those sets, but you use essence collected outside of dungeons, called Crimson Essence, to, like, upgrade and buff those sets. So clearly, Hypixel's also trying to push out the classes that Dungeons has into the main game, right? It makes sense. And then when you actually look at the way that the classes work in the main game, Berserker's the only real one. You look at Slayers, and every single Slayer weapon that is designed to kill said Slayer is a melee weapon. But yeah, had a lot of comments on that video. I had some good discussions with people as well. We had a long chat in my Discord about it too, with people saying that I was crazy and that it's ridiculous and stuff. But all in all, I think my points will stand. Now, one thing that came out of it a lot, right, was people saying things like, yeah, you know, okay, Berserker this, Berserker that, Mage this, Mage that, even Archer this and Archer that. But they were like, oh no, Tank is bad, right? You can't use Tank outside of dungeons. It's just not possible. Tank is a support class designed to be used in dungeons to tank damage and be good use for your team. I disagree. I fully disagree, actually. And what I wanted to talk about today was some things that I learned from playing other games that could certainly make Tank a good solo class, one that can actually be played like a legitimate regular class outside of dungeons and hold up really well by itself. What are these things, you may be asking? Well, for starters, I think Thorns damage should be the main way to go. Now, you might be thinking, well, what's wrong with you, bro? Thorns damage. Like, what? That's stupid. Thorns is like some horrible enchant that used to, like, ruin First Strike, and it's really bad, and blah, blah, and it sucks, right? And it's like, well, if you reworked the way Thorns damage works, and obviously gave it some meaningful value, some meaningful damage, it wouldn't be trash. Now, on top of that, people also say things like, oh, if Thorns is really good, then why would you play any other class? If all you have to do is just sit AFK, take a bunch of damage, and then kill things by just letting them hit you, that's just dumb, right? Really easy playstyle ruins the game. Well, you know, let's take a look at all the other classes we have right now. So, Archers have a skeleton pet, you know? Now, people like to sleep on the skeleton pet because the E-Drag pet exists, Wither skeleton pet exists, and the tiger pet. There's a lot of good combat pet options, right? But the skeleton pet is actually one of the strongest archer pets in the game. It's really, really good. People just forget about it. And I think I made a video on it a long time ago. It actually outdamages the Wither skeleton. It outdamages a lot of your favorite pets if you're playing Archer. Why? It's designed to do that. So obviously, things like G-Drag and E-Drag are going to beat the skeleton pet because they're just, what, 500 million coins of value? The skeleton pet is like 1 million maximum, which is why I say it's one of the best archer pets, because you're paying almost no money for an insanely strong pet you can use before you upgrade to the big guns, right? Now, when it comes to things like Tank, well, why doesn't Tank get a pet? Why not add a pet similar to the skeleton? Maybe the Guardian pet, which is supposed to be like a Thorns reflection damage. Yeah, it's good for enchanting XP and stuff too. But why not make a pet that heavily buffs Thorns damage? Or add something like, you know how the Crimson Isle armor set has the ticks? The Fervor armor set has like these Fervor ticks. If we take a look at the Fervor set, right? I can't even spell. It says here that blocking damage with your sword will grant you a stack of fervor, and then each fervor stack reduces incoming damage by 10%, and then at 5 stacks, you can taunt enemies, and you gain 3% more damage reduction, right? There's like this stacking system that they have with this armor set, which is meant to be able to tank a ton of damage. Why not add like a stacking set, but to boost Thorn's damage as well? Maybe add it onto a weapon, add it onto a pet, add it onto some items. You know, obviously, archers use bows, mages use magic damage weapons, and berserkers use melee weapons. Add some tank-designed gear that can buff Thorn's damage, or can buff the way that they take damage as well, so they're able to actually tank, because that's the whole point of the class. But actually make it so that you can't just sit AFK and let mobs hit you and you kill them, right? Because that'll get you killed. If you do that, you'll die. But if you're micromanaging a couple of weapons, you're using the right pets, you're paying attention to your gameplay properly, then you can effectively just tank damage and kill mobs, right? It sounds like a super simple concept, but if you apply that super simple concept to everything, if you're a berserker, just left-click a bunch and kill everything. If you're a mage, just right-click a bunch, you kill everything. If you're an archer, you just right-click a bunch and everything dies as well, right? So yeah, that's what I want to get out of the way, really. How I think tank could genuinely be a really good class if something like Thorn's damage was the main damage source for it. Obviously, they could probably add a secondary stat. They could add like a secondary reflection or just a reflecting stat, maybe, which might act similar to Thorns. Maybe it buffs Thorns. Maybe it complements Thorns in a different way. Maybe to like true damage rather than just regular raw damage, for example. Like, there's a lot of things they could do to expand on the whole idea. But I do think that tank definitely has potential to be a really good solo class. Just with the current set the game is in, it's obviously not going to be. So yeah, that's tank really. I don't know. Anyone got anything to say about that? What do you guys reckon? What do you guys reckon about a tank change like that? Because I think that'd be pretty sick. It could work with the mastery scene that they're going to add. I've heard nothing about that. Feel free to inform me. Basically, the masteries make it so there are 3 main classes outside dungeons: mages, archer, and berserker. Yeah, that is what I have sort of been pushing for, and I actually did like push for in my most recent video, saying how like berserker currently is kind of just like the only thing that exists out of dungeons, officially speaking, because that's what Hypixel is supporting with the Slayer weapons and with all these things. Like, they do have a few mage weapons and a couple of bows that you can get from non-dungeon stuff, but yeah, ranged and magic damage aren't heavily supported as it is with Skyblock. Could be good. I feel like that might overcomplicate things a little bit too much. So it kind of dives into what I mentioned in my the true end game video. Once again, fairly clickbaity title, but technically the truth. Yeah, the current questline on the hub island doesn't really explain anything, you know? So they definitely have to add like proper tutorial if they want to add more complicated things to explain stuff. Because even dungeons doesn't have that great of explanation. You kind of just have to figure that out off of videos or streams or what people do. But yeah, tank, they could definitely add a tank mastery. If you're saying that there's these masteries that they're work in progress for the 3 main classes, like yeah, archer, mage, berserker, very easy to make as main classes. One is range damage projectiles, one is melee damage, non-projectiles, one is magic damage, kind of can be ranged, could be melee. Uses a whole different system, mana, instead of arrows or any other type of fuel, any other type of ammunition. So yeah, those are the 3 mains. But like, tank honestly could be its own class too. Just make a really good way where reflecting damage is a viable option to deal damage, and make it so that it's just as hard to play as everything else, you know? You have to use the correct pets, you gotta use the correct armor, you have to micromanage things properly, you have to try and maintain fervor stacks, you know? You have to actually try and keep your streaks going, you know? You need to actually be paying attention to the game. You need to use healing abilities to keep your regen high, you know? You want to be using things that have high life regen to keep you alive. They can do all those things to make it balanced, to make it like a reasonable class. Effectively, at its core, all it is, tank damage, reflect damage, kill things. I think that'd be really cool. Honestly, another thing, hot take here, I think Hyperion damage out of dungeons should be heavy nerfed. Like, the Hyperion shouldn't be doing over 1 million damage per right click. It should be doing max like 150k. Like 150, 200k. And then instead of the Hyperion, add different mage weapons that aren't just, haha, funny boom boom sword go brrr.